governance of our friend here. Do you want to come round with me? Peter Stuyvesant, no well-known name, right? Peter Stuyvesant. This nice, friendly guy. So how welcome were they when they arrived? Not very, right. So they arrive and he doesn't want them. He says he considers them hateful enemies and blasphemers in the name of Christ. Now he's a strict Calvinist, and so as far as he's concerned, anything other than Calvinists are not welcome. I call him an equal opportunity hater. So he says if they allow these Jews to come, we cannot refuse the Lutherans and the Papists. He don't want anybody else, right? But he has to write back to his bosses in the Netherlands, and they say, yes, you should accept these people. They may be useful as traders, whatever. I don't suspect that these particular people were, but they said, yes, you must accept them, but you put conditions. And the conditions are kind of relevant for the future. And the conditions were, you must not worship in public, and you must look after your own, which is where it comes to. Yeah, so you must look after them. Don't become a burden. I mean, isn't these familiar?
Oh, so familiar.
So familiar, aren't they? I mean, we're hearing this every day, really. Yeah, yeah. So always an issue.
Who is the captain suing?
The passengers.
The passengers.
Yeah,
so what could they? Yeah, I mean, they had no recourse.
They had to work their way through
it.
to be able to pay their passage.
Okay.
Yes. So yes, and you know, we take a lot of kids through, and so on, and people have all these stereotypes of all Jews being super rich. We start with these very bedraggled people with nothing, absolutely nothing. Okay, all right. So having said that the original, making this original link with 1492, the people who had ended up there and then in New Amsterdam to be New York are what we call Sephardi. That means that they come from the Iberian Peninsula, and you know what language they speak? No, but good guess. I've had people in here who speak French.
Ladino, Spanish.
It tends to be Ladino and Spanish. Ladino is a language which is largely Spanish mixed with Hebrew. And I think that's important because our first few galleries here, we'll find that is the majority. Not everybody, and there's certainly somebody here who came from Lithuania, but you know, in terms of groups, that was the majority language. And that's kind of surprising to many people because if you think of Jewish names being somewhat like mine, you know, then here is early families, and you'll see Gomez, Lopez, you know, and Seychelles. These are the names of the early families. Okay, let's move on. So they start to establish some early communities, and because many do actually have these trading links. This is the early success was due to trading. So the first communities are going to be New York, Philadelphia, Newport, Rhode Island, and then Charleston and Savannah. Those are the early communities. And if you look at this model here, what do you notice about the outside? Does this look like a synagogue? So again, we're reminded of that ruling of not being able to worship in public, and so therefore the outside for sure, which is still standing, looks like any building of the time. But if you move around and look inside, what does it look like? This is a typical inside of what we would call a Sephardi synagogue. Right? There's a women's gallery upstairs, and they have this platform in the middle, which we call a bima, from which the reading is held from there, and that is typical of the Sephardi tradition. What's also kind of interesting, I don't know if people who's visited there, but there's also a trapdoor there. Why would there be a trapdoor?
Where's the gap?
Yeah, somewhere down there. Yeah. Yeah. I roughly. I mean, I'm not sure exactly.
So people can get in and worship?
They went in. Yeah, they went in okay, apparently. But this was clearly a sign that although they were beginning to be quite established, there was still a lot of insecurity. So, and also, I mean, you could say historic insecurity. These were people who, I mean, nowadays we know a lot about, trauma being transferred through generations. They didn't know much about that, but they were still not, and probably not so sure how welcome they were yet. Doing well, for sure, absolutely beginning to establish in many ways, but not quite 100% clear. Now, one guy here, I'm going to mention one. This is what they all do in the news, don't they? It's a huge story. You pick up one person. It is easier to follow. This guy's called Aaron Lopez. Aaron Lopez came from what we call a converso family. So does anybody know what that would mean? Do you want to explain? All right, I'll let you. Okay. So those who stayed behind in the only people who stayed behind in the Iberian Peninsula, because we're talking both Spain and Portugal, was to convert to Catholicism. And there was, for hundreds of years really, the Inquisition didn't quite believe that these people really had converted, and they were right in many cases, because what they would do is they would go to church, be overtly Catholic, but they would continue to practice lighting candles on a Friday night in the basement, or doing certain things like that. In fact, they even said, if they were sort of especially if they prepared a special meal for a Friday night, that was already suspicious. So, and this was dangerous. I mean, they could lose their lives, some of them certainly, but mostly lose their lives. So he came from that kind of a family. That was his heritage.
So the name again was what?
Converso.
Converso.
Converted.
Yeah. There was another name that was used for a long time. I'm blanking on it.
The crypto Jews.
Well, that's another one, crypto Jews, because we often refer to people. Never mind, it's not. That's the term. Yes, that's the term that's used now.
I went to a little town in northern Portugal called Belmonte.
Yes,
and
yes.
it was a town that literally until the 1920s, the Jews still thought the Inquisition was going on.
Yes.
And so they would share that they would go to church Friday night and light 2 candles on the altar in place of lighting those candles at home.
Yes. Yeah, there's some kind of amazing stories about this hiddenness.
Yes.
It's fascinating, and there have been quite a few books written about that. Yes.
Yeah.
And now we're finding even in places like New Mexico.
Yes.
There was a historian there who I spoke to this historian, and he said that somebody would come and stand at the corner of the door and would whisper, "Sarah Lopez, let's get in the basement." And everyone helped because they were practicing Catholic. It was very interesting.
Very interesting.
And they kept this kind of strange
Dual
mix
life.
going. Yeah. Anyway, that was his background. But then what freedom therefore means to him is to be able to be who he really wants to be. But he's also, if you look at this artifact here, what is he trading at?
It's scary.
I think it's interesting looking, isn't it? It's candle molds. Candle molds. It really wasn't
Like
that
a-
scary, but it's fascinating.
Yeah.
But candles, if you're looking back, this was important, right? We were talking before. There was any other way of lighting. He had a lot of other things he was trading as well. But and interestingly, when he wanted to finally naturalize, even though we think of Rhode Island as being one of the freest places, in fact, he had to go to Massachusetts. He wasn't allowed to. So there was still, there were still various barriers at this point. So there's lots of stuff here, so you can't just stop it. And this. Do you all know what this is? Yes, it is. And this is written by a scribe. This is. We know that this is one from a Sephardi one because of the silk cover. That was traditional. Yes, and it's always, either way, it is always written by a scribe, handwritten. It has to be handwritten. You have to be very specially skilled, and if they make a mistake, they have to stop you. Yeah, I mean, it's quite a thing. Yeah. But here, I can direct you to this. This is the difference.